We've been so brainwashed by society, by women, that men are the ones who are emotionally inept, emotionally unavailable, emotionally shut down, uncomfortable with their emotions. We're taught that men are brought up not to feel. In my experience and what I know is that this is a projection of how we experience ourselves as women. Hello, I'm Karen Seitz, and this is the Happy Wife School. This podcast is for married women to realize that we are responsible for our happiness, that no one and no thing can make us happy, and that our husbands are not the source of our unhappiness. In each episode, I red pill married women to know that we are the problem in our marriages to good men. For the good men, this podcast will wake you up to the realities of your wife's woman ways, to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to her emasculation in a constructive, caring way. Before we dive into today's episode, a couple reminders. My message is meant for common and usual marital issues. My podcast is not intended for abusive, violent, or compulsive behaviors in a marriage that are threatening or dangerous. Also, please take a second to visit my website and learn more about my courses, which offer solutions for married women and good men. You can find the link in the description below. With all that being said, let's get started. Let's get started in our topic. So I am talking about today why your wife is so emotionally dysregulated. A reminder for the women and men listening, this channel is for women married to good men and good men married to women that are dealing with normal everyday issues behind closed doors that you would expect your neighbors to see. It is not for abusive relationships, physically abusive relationships, extreme dysfunctional relationships. This is not the place for you, and my message isn't meant to support you. If that is what you are facing, you need to get support from a licensed, trained professional. So with that being said, I want to talk to good men today to help you understand why your wife is so emotionally dysregulated, because it's a really important topic to cover and revisit. And also to the women. So as a woman who is emotionally dysregulated and has to stay committed to myself and live in what I talk about, can't take responsibility to be in control of my emotional state, I want the women listening to know that we don't have to be a victim of our emotional state and how emotional we can be as women and are as women, that we can actually learn to be in control and use that as a path to feel really, really good about ourselves, that there is a much richer, deeper experience of us as women than being emotional, because as women, we often live under the false impression that being emotional gives us our power, gives us our richness and vibrancy of life, and that life would be flat or boring, or we would be flatlined if we didn't have our emotional ways as women. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. And there's a much richer, deeper experience we can have of ourselves as women when we learn to be in control and to regulate our emotional state and to access the truth of who we are, which is not being emotional all the time. So that's some of what we're getting into today. And the reason that I want to talk about this is that I recently talked with a good man on a one-on-one session who asked me, why? Why is my wife so emotionally dysregulated? And I liked that phrase and term and thought that's a good topic. I'm going to talk about this. And what's interesting is that in my work with good men, I don't need to teach good men to emotionally regulate. I do not need to teach good men to emotionally regulate. However, it is what I always have to teach women, and it is the foundation of what we must learn as women to be happy, to have a healthy relationship with ourselves so that we can have a healthy relationship with our husbands, that the path and way to have a healthy relationship in marriage with a good man is for us as women to learn to emotionally regulate, because we are so emotionally dysregulated. And the problem and challenges is that we've been so brainwashed by society, by women, that men are the ones who are emotionally inept, emotionally unavailable, emotionally shut down, uncomfortable with their emotions. We're taught that men are brought up not to feel. In my experience and what I know is that this is a projection of how we experience ourselves as women, being emotionally inept, emotionally unavailable, shut down, and uncomfortable with our emotions. And this experience we have that we do project, but then can also come to fruition, is actually the result of men being emasculated by women. When good men are emotionally shut down, emotionally unavailable, withdrawn, depressed, distant, this isn't the nature of who they are. It's a result of the emasculation that has happened to good men in our society by women, and the stories and myths that we continue to perpetuate onto men in our society and culture. Because the truth is, good men are sensitive. They are attuned to their emotional state. They're capable of being in control of their emotions. They're pragmatic in their understanding and approach and reaction to life. It is the prodding, the emasculation, the gaslighting of good men that causes them to be emotionally dysregulated. So the solution for men having that experience isn't to teach men to regulate their emotions. It's helping to educate men to see the reality of how they give their power away to their wives, give their power away to women, to cause them to react in those ways. And when they understand that reality and what's happening, they can take their power back, and they are naturally self-regulated in their emotions and can control that. Some of you might be thinking, because I thought about this too in preparing for this topic, you might be thinking, but Karen, there is an epidemic of depression and suicide amongst men. So how can they be naturally emotionally regulated? In my perspective and what I see, and through the principles of what I teach, that the epidemic of depression in men and the high suicide rates of men are men being emasculated in our society, constantly being told in a myriad of ways that they are the problem in relationships with women in society, that just being a man is wrong in itself. And they internalize that they are the problem because men are not given the truth and the education to understand what's happening, and not given the education to learn to not give their power away to the emasculation and degradation that is naturally there in a relationship with a woman, and then perpetuated and enabled in our society by things like feminism and the Me Too movement. And then not to mention, which is a whole other subject on its own, how emasculation in men starts in their relationship with their mothers, and how emasculating mothers are to their sons. So it's important to know that a good man's natural state is to be emotionally centered and process life and have reasonable responses and approaches to life. Doesn't mean that he can't have a reaction here and there, but in general is naturally emotionally regulated. And for a good man to stay emotionally regulated, he must learn how he has unknowingly given his power away to women, to society, to make him wrong and bad as a man. So he knows the truth of who he is and no longer buys into the lies and stories men are told about who they are. So the truth is that as married women, and we're going to stick to marriage now and moving forward with our topic today, the truth is, as married women, we are highly emotionally dysregulated, and we have what I like to talk about, very low emotional intelligence. And men know this in their wives. They know this very, very well in their wives. And as women, we feel entitled. We have to see and know we feel entitled to be emotionally dysregulated in our marriages because we're so unhappy in ourselves. And it's almost payback. Our emotional dysregulation and our moodiness and bitchiness is payback because we believe our husbands are to blame and the reason why we are so unhappy. And there's no solution in that for the women listening. when you feel entitled and you're blaming your husband for why you're so unhappy and then so emotionally dysregulated in the marriage, there's no solution because we've put the power and control outside of us, which is why emotional intelligence is a very important concept. And in its simplest form, there's a lot out there and a very expansive definition and education on emotional intelligence, but in its simplest form, which is how I work with it, is that emotional intelligence is the ability to self-regulate one's emotional state. So our low EQ as married women is that we are unable and unwilling to regulate our emotional state. That in fact, our emotional state is in control of us, which then spews out in our marriage and is the very mechanism of which we emasculate and gaslight and manipulate our husbands. And we operate in low EQ in our marriages. Whereas good men in a marriage naturally have high EQ, are able to self-regulate their emotional state. And what high emotional intelligence says, or EQ, is I am in control of my emotional state. And that's good men in a marriage. They're in control of their emotional state until they are pushed beyond the edge by their wives' own emotional dysregulation and low emotional intelligence, that they do withdraw or become emotionally unavailable or depressed or moody in the relationship. But what's fascinating is, as women, if we learn to emotionally regulate and show up as our best in the relationship and stop emasculating, stop gaslighting, stop manipulating our husbands with our emotions and making them wrong and bad, a good man will re-engage, and he's steady Eddie. I mean, that's the very nature of a good man, and is steady, predictable, stable, is because they're naturally emotionally regulated. And what we want to accept and understand, no matter the facade we wear or the charades we put on as women, or the theater, as I sometimes like to call it, is that on a spectrum, all women are emotionally dysregulated. And on one end of the spectrum, in our emotional dysregulation, we wear the facade of being Zen-like and nothing phases us, and we can just compress our emotional state and just have a facade of always being at peace. That was me. That was me, especially as I've talked about before on my spiritual path. Thought I was very highly, highly enlightened, guys. I did. I just carried the Zen-like state with me everywhere, but on the inside it was an emotional storm constantly. And I could wear that facade, or chose to wear that facade, out in the world, and then get home behind closed doors that would come down. It's like my husband was like, who is this woman? This isn't the yoga teacher at the yoga class I go to with her. And that's one end of the spectrum of us being emotionally dysregulated. You can know a woman that just seems just even-keeled, Zen-like, has an emotional storm going on the inside. And then on the other end of the spectrum are women who pride ourselves in being highly emotional, bitchy, moody, because we portray it and see it as a sign of strength and power, and it's how we control other people, because we know that we can get our husbands or other people to march in line when we are very emotional, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and leads to us being quite bitchy. Whichever woman has the highest bitch mode wins in the hierarchy to be in control and power of others, because everyone else is scared of her and how she makes them feel. So where I would like to go with this, and getting into why are we so emotionally dysregulated? Where does that come from? And looking at a different angle than it being what as women we weave as our victim stories, what good men naively buy into about their wives and other women. We want to look at a different direction, in that it has nothing to do with our childhood. It has nothing to do with our upbringing, has nothing to do with our parents or daddy issues or mommy issues or any of that. Because as long as it is something in our past or our circumstances or where we came from or our upbringing or our parents or our mother or our father, we cannot change it. We cannot change it. So we have to view our emotional dysregulation of how am I the problem in this? So that then we can be in control to change it. Because as long as a woman, as long as we stay in our victim story of how this has happened to us, or that the story of this is just me as a woman, I'm a woman and I'm emotional. It's just how we're wired. It's just who we are. It's a cop-out. And it's a trap. And you will never get out of it. And you will make your life miserable. And you will make your husband's life miserable. You will make your kids' lives miserable. So you have to be willing to see there's a different cause of our emotional dysregulation that starts with us, which is empowering. Because if it's me, which is what I've had to learn in every aspect of my life, if I'm the problem, then I am empowered to be the solution, which means only holding the mirror up to myself and not looking back in my past. That's why therapy is such a trap and enables our victim stories and enables our emotional dysregulation. So we have to look somewhere else, which is what we're going to do in 3 ways to explain why women are so emotionally dysregulated. And speaking specifically in marriage, we're looking at 3 ways to explain why your wife is so emotionally dysregulated. And for the married women listening, just flip that into 3 ways to explain why I'm so emotionally dysregulated in my marriage. And what happens in our marriages, which I think is important to talk a little bit about here in our emotional dysregulation, is that we become really bitchy. And we can do that in what I call the nice bitch way or just the outright bitch way. No facade in it at all. And women take pride in that. But that was something I didn't want to see about myself because of the facade I had that I was so sweet and spiritually enlightened and had it together and could wear that facade easily. I had to recognize the intentions behind my actions. And then when I wasn't able to really keep that facade up in my marriage, that I was bitchy, because that's where our emotional dysregulation leads to. And when we're bitchy, we're short, we're cold, prickly, edgy, walled off, can have the silent or not so silent message to our husbands of don't touch me, bother me, or try to engage me in any way, leave me alone. And good men feel that. They feel that as our impenetrable wall. When we're bitchy, we're sharp, we're irritable, short-tempered, can throw daggers with our eyes in a quick glance. And this is what our husbands experience in marriage when we're emotionally dysregulated. And that's why, if you're a good man listening, that's why you're on eggshells, constantly wondering who's going to show up, who am I coming home to, who's going to walk through the door. Because in a split second, your wife can seem in a seemingly good mood and easygoing and nice. In a split second, that switch goes off and bitch mode is in full operation. And we know that in ourselves as women, if we're willing to be honest, that we can turn that switch on so quickly. And then our husbands are thinking, what the hell did I do? What just happened? And the tables are turned on them. And what's fascinating, and this was my MO, is my husband can feel that. What we have to understand as women is our husbands feel it. You're not fooling them. You can sit there looking calm and maybe have some kind of a smile on your face, but when that bitch mode switch goes off, they feel it very quickly. And brave men will say, what just happened? Where'd you go? And oftentimes as women in our facade and not wanting to be forthcoming and take accountability, I'm fine. Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing changed. I'm fine. But men, no, it's not fine. So let's talk about why we go into bitch mode, why we're emotionally dysregulated. We're going into 3 ways of why. And the first way I want to talk about is that as women, we are pain avoiders. And this is a confusing one. This could be a confusing one. But number one, we are pain avoiders. And the reason that I say this can be confusing, because it's like, wait, but as women, we're so emotional. So how can we be pain avoiders if we're so emotional? What happens is that as pain avoiders as women, and reminding you that men are problem solvers, but as pain avoiders, we are constantly compressing our emotional state to feel emotionally in control. So what that means for us as women is we are so controlling and keep such a tight grip on our lives because we want life to look like a straight line. No bumps, no surprises, no curveballs, no unexpected, because then we would actually have to feel and face the discomfort of ourselves and the discomfort of life and the adversity and challenges that come in life. So because we are constantly compressing our emotional state by avoiding the emotionally painful things in life, the challenges, the ups and downs, the curveballs, the unexpected, we live on the edge of emotional instability. It's like we're a kettle, and any bump in life causes us to blow like a kettle because we've been avoiding our emotional pain and hiding and being emotional and avoiding life, again, that our emotional state is just constantly compressed. So sometimes I like to use a snow globe to teach in this, so I'm actually going to do that. So here's a snow globe, and imagine all the snow settled at the bottom is our compressed emotions as women, because we're avoiding just the natural challenges of life, the conflict of life, the things that are emotionally uncomfortable, constantly avoiding that and facing it and dealing with it and problem solving. That's not our nature and what we do. So life comes along and all of our compressed emotional state gets shaken up, causing us to be like that kettle that blows. And that's because we're pain avoiders. We don't run into life addressing and taking the challenges head on, which actually causes us to be very emotional. That as pain avoiders, we're very emotional. If we were to face life and embrace the challenges as opportunities to grow and learn, we would be able to emotionally self-regulate, and that snow globe would be clear. So that's one reason why, as women, we are so emotionally dysregulated, is actually because we're pain avoiders and conflict avoiders. I don't want to face anything that's going to disrupt the comfort zone of which I've created my life to be just so that we have such a tight grip on and such a tight control on. The second reason why, as women, and why your wives are so emotionally dysregulated, number two, we believe that being emotional is being in touch with our emotions and that we are actually feeling. I'm going to repeat that one. Number two, we believe being emotional is being in touch with our emotions and that we are actually feeling. So contrary to what therapy teaches or what we say as women, being emotional is not being in touch with our emotions. It's actually the opposite. When we are emotional as women, which is how we live our lives, believing that's who we are and that's how we process our emotions, I've had to learn something very, very, very different. That being emotional is being out of touch with my emotions. And it is a result of that compressed emotional state. Being emotional is a way to hide from our emotions and what we are actually feeling. It's a way to be caught in the drama and chaos of our lives, so we stay on the surface and never dive deeper into what we're actually feeling. And what I had to learn is there is no feeling in being emotional. That was one of the first things that I was taught when I started to learn this path of taking responsibility and accountability and getting out of camp victim is that when I would emote through crying and having a deep cathartic cry, I had to realize there was no processing of my emotions in that at all. It was a way to actually hide and escape what I was really feeling so that I didn't have to go there because it seemed too painful. What I was taught and what I did in therapy was to cathartically cry as a way to release the trapped emotions in me from the pain and trauma of my past and upbringing, which actually just kept all of it alive. And there was no processing or healing in that. When we are emotional, it does just the opposite. It disconnects us from our emotional state and our ability to feel. They're two, feeling and being emotional are actually two very, very different things. And I never knew that. But once I realized it, I can see it. I can know when I'm being emotional, nothing gets resolved. The victim story still lives as I've learned to actually slow down and feel, which doesn't involve cathartic crying. I might have a couple tears, but there's no crying in feeling, which was like a shocking discovery and experience to have. But I can know when I'm emotional, nothing gets solved. The victim story stays. When I actually truly feel, which is staying very slowed down and purposeful and feeling through a charge of an experience in life, there's no crying. There's no being emotional. And then it resolves and I'm actually neutral to the experience. And that was a fascinating experience to have. So that's part of why as women we stay so emotional, is we actually think that that's being in touch with our emotions and that we're actually feeling. And we're taught that. And it's reinforced. And then we buy into the myth in our society that as women are emotionally attuned and emotionally mature and emotionally in touch beings, and men are not. And it's actually not true. The men very naturally process emotions without needing to emote and be emotional. They actually process their feelings by being problem solvers and understanding life. It doesn't mean they don't feel the punch of life or the emotional charge of what happens. But in general, they go into problem solving mode and through that can process the emotional pain through viewing life practically and pragmatically and problem solving and moving forward. So that's number 2. Number 3 of why your wife is so emotionally dysregulated. Number 3, being emotionally dysregulated in our marriages is a power play. Being emotionally dysregulated in our marriages is a power play. So as I mentioned in the beginning and setting this up, the biggest symptom of our emotional dysregulation in marriage is our bitchiness as women. And that bitchiness is how we gain control of our husbands as good men and gain control of what they feel, what they think, how they experience themselves in the marriage. We are the ultimate puppet masters in our emotional dysregulation. And here's what we are thinking as women in the power play of being in full bitch mode, which is synonymous with our emotional dysregulation, and why men feel they are on eggshells all the time and become scared of their wives and intimidated by their wives, is because we use our bitch mode and emotional dysregulation as a power mode. And here's what we're thinking in that. We can always get you to march in place. We want you to serve our needs and fall in line. We are deceptive and cunning so that you are off center. We are determined to keep you in line and be in control of you. And in that, we are in control of your experience and how you feel. So it's a power play. And then I had to see these things in myself. And it's why it's so effective, sadly, so effective in a marriage between a woman and a good man. When we use this as a power play, there's such a pull and push, like a cat and mouse game in this. And the deceptive cunning side is that one moment we can be in total bitch mode, and then we flip that switch off and we're nice and seemingly fun again, or laid back or easygoing. The switch goes off, and then a good man's like, oh, I guess everything's okay now. And good men have short memories when their wives flip like that and then are nice. So they forget she was just in bitch mode, and they fall for the nice facade. And then before they know it, there she flips the switch again. And in that process of push and pull, there's a weakening that happens to good men in that, which is how this is such a power play. So those are 3 ways why your wife is so emotionally dysregulated, and women are so emotionally dysregulated and ultimately go into bitch mode in our marriages. So I want to talk now a little bit about the solution, as I always do, and then I want to talk to women. And I want to talk about camp victim versus camp take responsibility. When we live in camp victim, that's where we are emotional. The reason for being emotional in camp victim is that we have placed our experience outside of us in the context of our marriage, in our husband's hands, and the circumstances of our life. So outside of marriage, just the circumstances of our life, or life in itself, our past, our upbringing, our parents. We live in camp victim, blaming others for our emotional experience, which effectively plants us in the experience of being emotional. Because remember, as I said before, there's no processing of our emotions and being emotional. We get stuck there. And it's because we have put the power and control outside of us. Feeling and processing our emotions so that we are not emotional happens in camp take responsibility. In order to feel and process our emotions so that we are not emotional, we have to take responsibility for our experience of our emotions and our reaction to life. It doesn't mean that things don't come up that elicit an emotional reaction in us. That's life. That's being human. That's normal. But in camp take responsibility, I recognize my emotional experience is my own, even in the face of a loss or something challenging or a curveball or the unexpected in life. When I take responsibility for my experience, that what I am feeling is me in response to life, but this is me. In that accountability and responsibility, I can actually process my emotions and not be emotional. As women, we get scared of that because we think if I'm not emotional, I won't feel like I'm alive. But what we actually have to see is that in being emotional, we are deadened inside. It's a false sense of being alive. It's a false sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. That when we live and can't take responsibility and can take responsibility for our emotions and our emotional experience and actually process through that, you experience you. And it is a deep expression and experience of aliveness because you're actually feeling. There is no feeling in being emotional. I know that can be hard to grasp, but I am here to tell you that there is no feeling in being emotional. So when you learn to be in control of your emotional state by taking responsibility for it and actually feeling through your emotional experiences as you, not what's happening to you, there is a richness and aliveness and connection to yourself that you can never experience in being emotional. And that can only happen and can't take responsibility. And that happens by learning to have a healthy relationship with ourselves. When you learn to move from camp victim to camp take responsibility In that process, you learn to be in control of your emotional state and develop the learned skill of high emotional intelligence so that you can outgrow low emotional intelligence where your emotional state is in control of you. The solution for men, and what I want men to know, is that the reality of your wife's emotional dysregulation is that it's a choice. Your wife's emotional dysregulation is a choice. The example I most like to use with this is the difference of a woman being at work on her monthly cycle versus being at home on her monthly cycle. That when we go to work and say we're feeling moody or more emotional hormonally on our monthly cycle, we have the ability and capability to be in control of that in our jobs and in the workplace, because we know if we're not, we would get fired. So we feel a sense of responsibility there to be in control, and we can make that choice. Yet we come home and feel entitled to not be in control of our emotional state. It's just what it is, and let it spew out. And that's a choice we are making. So don't be fooled that it's something you've done or are doing or not doing that your wife is so emotionally dysregulated. Don't be fooled that, oh, it's just because she's a woman. That's just how she is. That keeps you stuck and out of the reality of what's happening. So you have to understand her emotional dysregulation is her responsibility. There's nothing you can do to solve it or temper it. That it's something she must choose to want to gain control of and understand and have integrity and character to be in control of her emotional state at home, just as she does at work or at the grocery store with complete strangers or at church or with her friend group. If she can choose to be the nice, easygoing, emotionally in control woman in those arenas, she can choose to do it at home as well. She's choosing to have low EQ. She's choosing to be emotional because she blames you and feels entitled to not keep it together and not be in control at home. It's our lack of accountability and our lack of integrity as women in our marriages, and then gaslighting you to make you believe it's somehow your fault. It's a power play. So a good man's path forward to not be a victim to his wife's emotional dysregulation is to understand the reality and to stay firmly grounded in that reality, to see the truth of his wife as a woman and not get sucked into the power play and not get sucked into the games. That's how you regain your control so that your wife can no longer manipulate you with her emotional state. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you haven't, go check me out on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can find the links in the description below to connect with me there. For those women listening who know you are the problem and want a path forward to take responsibility and change your own inner turmoil and unhappiness, I have a course for women called the Happiness Program, which is the solution to the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself and the issues and challenges you have in your life and your marriage. You can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. And for the good men listening who want a solution to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife, I have a course for you too called the Marriage Rescue Course for Good Men Only that teaches you how to rebuild your strength and confidence as a good man so that you can navigate the relationship with your wife in a healthy, constructive way. Again, you can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.